How well are you at creative problem solving? Because if it's not creative, if it's not differentiated, everybody else can copy it. If you know the customer, you can do really well and make solid decisions as a PM. Suddenly we got a call from our payments team. Hey, what's happening? Is there some fraud going on?
Today we're chatting with Saurabh Mahajan, a product management maestro. Saurabh has designed products that has impacted millions of Indian lives. What are the three things that one needs to do to become a PM?
If you cannot explain your judgment really well, it's super hard to be a PM. 2016, when Ola was still a very nascent business, 3% were ghost rides. And that is a big embarrassment for us. How can you solve this problem of fraud? And we're going to put two-factor authentication on our rides. So in a country like India, it's very important for you to have disincentives and incentives for great behavior. At Swiggy, if we hear complaints about a driver, we actually give them like a two-strikes policy. So putting myself in the customer shoes, going through that journey myself multiple times.
Hey everyone, today we're chatting with Saurabh Mahajan, a product management maestro who's been transforming India's tech scene. Saurabh's resume reads who's who of Indian unicorns, whether it is Swiggy, Ola, Amazon. Saurabh has worked at some of the biggest companies and designed products that has impacted millions of Indian lives. Today, we're actually going to discuss some very cool things with Saurabh. One, customer experience and the impact that it has had on his own product development journey. The second cool piece that we're going to talk about is how India is a low trust economy and how has he designed products that have actually worked in the Indian economy with this really cool case study on guess what. Why don't you stay tuned and we're going to have some great fun on the episode today. If you do like the episode, please do like, subscribe to Behind the Feature. Welcome to the show, Saurabh. It's great having you on Behind the Feature.
Thank you so much, Diksha. I'm very happy to be on your show and would love to share my experience on this episode.
I want to start with something fun today. Can you tell me a super fun or a wild story from your career to get us started today?
Way back in 2012, I started my career with a gaming company, and I was with a company called Zynga, and I used to lead a game called Mafia Wars. And Mafia Wars was a web-based game. It was back then a mature game, which means it was losing audience, but the hardcore gamers sort of stuck on with the game. And we used to, on an average, make about $150,000 a day, right? And that was sort of the usual run rate, but a bunch of us in the product team actually planned a Thanksgiving sale, and I was the revenue PM, so bulk of the work sort of came on my shoulders. And we planned a Thanksgiving sale where we were giving some discount on the game currency, and we sort of planned it all out, and we sort of said, okay, let's just try and hit $1 million in sale, which was 6x our daily revenue in a sale would be something which was definitely a pretty hefty target. And then when the actual sale day happened, we were actually on course to hit 1 million, and we were sort of very happy. And suddenly we got a call from our payments team, and they were like, hey, what's happening? Is there some fraud going on? I got a call from, like, Zynga Payments got called by Facebook Payments that, look, there seems to be some fraud in Mafia Wars where people are just buying like crazy, buying game currency like crazy, and then even spending it like crazy. And they couldn't believe it. Like, imagine a game which was sort of literally very mature, running like $1 million a day, and that was fun because you sort of plan it all out. You sort of know it's going to happen. You're sort of tracking it every minute on that Thanksgiving sale, and then suddenly Facebook sort of pauses your payments for 5 minutes and says, we feel something is fishy. Why don't you get it right? And that was crazy because I mean, those 5 minutes would have been $20,000 extra. And we eventually got it back up because we were so responsive, and we said, this is like, we're tracking it. But this was one crazy wild story right in the very beginning of my career, like 6 months out of my MBA, and I was running $1 million a day sale. The experience was surreal. It was pretty wild.
I always say people underestimate the amazing experiences that you learn in a gaming company as a product manager. And thank you so much for sharing something so cool. Sort of what I want to do actually is first kind of dive into, you and I have been chatting, and you always speak about the role that, how important it is, the focus on customer experience. Could you share why is it that customer experience was so important for you, and how has it driven your product management career?
Yeah. So in any consumer business, right? very often, customer experience that you provide over a period of time to customers is the differentiator for most consumer businesses. I wouldn't say that's the case in the MVP stage, where you're solving the problem for a very small audience, and then customer experience doesn't really matter all that much. But once you are mainstream, once you've got product market fit, and once you've got millions and millions of customers, apps like Amazon, Flipkart, Swiggy, customer experience becomes the most important reason why people come back to you over and over again. And any bad experience, very often we as executives or as PMs bury like a metric, like a 0.1% customers face this, or 0.2% customers face this. Hey, do I really need to prioritize this because it's just 0.2% customers? But very often, the detraction a single incident can lead, it might be a 0.1% number in your case. And whereas the detraction it sort of leads to, you remember that over a period of time, over many, many years. I remember I was actually in 2019, I was actually a PM leader at Swiggy, leading fulfillment and selection. And that day, I was packing some Diwali gifts, and I had to sort of leave my house in half an hour to just distribute those gifts. And I had to go to a dear friend's house. Unfortunately, I ordered something from a very very famous sweet shop in Bangalore, and I got the wrong item. And I knew it's wrong because the bill said that is not the item I ordered. But I actually packed it and took it to my friend's place, knowing fully well this person is not going to eat that sweets or not going to eat that item because that's how the person was. So that experience sort of you can remember 5 or 6 years later. So that is the power of one bad experience leading to customers remembering you for a lifetime. This is what happened to me. So those are some lessons I have learned myself. I've learned from consumers. Learned looking at hard data.
This is very interesting. You have shared, and I completely agree with you, right? There's been an experience I've personally had where I've had a bad experience and I've never gone back to ordering from that app. Uh, with that, I actually want to understand more of how, as a product manager, product leader yourself, you actually use user feedback and NPS. And can you share like a cool feature that you have developed with our audience?
Yeah. So one very, very good example I can think of is back in September 2019 at Swiggy, my team sort of solved a very important problem for our frequent customers, especially customers who ordered food frequently from multiple addresses, right? So if you are a customer ordering from multiple addresses, very often at Swiggy, we would default you to an address, right? And sometimes that defaulting would go wrong, right? Not in huge numbers, but again, 0.3%, 0.4% orders. And customers would not notice that defaulting has gone wrong, which means you're ordering for your home and you're actually, in your office. And suddenly the office address sort of comes and you don't really notice where you're ordering right now. And that's when you sort of order the food and the food has gone to a different address. So you are hungry plus angry at the same time. And that's when the whole customer experience goes for a toss, right? So we solved this problem where customers would inadvertently order food at a defaulted address which was wrong or incorrect by a very cool feature called smart address selection, which enabled our customers to seamlessly notice and select the correct delivery address in the Swiggy app. So if you remember, as soon as you launch the Swiggy app, you actually have um, you know a pop-up which sort of says where you're ordering the food. It sort of comes and disappears very quickly, but it allows you to recall, hey, this is where the food is going because this is where Swiggy has defaulted me. And the reason we got it wrong earlier was because we didn't have very accurate GPS signals from phones at times, and we would just use the previously defaulted address. So we sort of revamped our address defaulting logic, and we actually asked customers whenever the GPS signal was not very accurate, hey, can you choose which address you really want instead of making a decision on behalf of customers? So my learning from that feature, that problem, and the way we solved it was a visually telling people, is very powerful, right? So if you open the Swiggy app, we had this screen where the app actually loads and you now see the address, right? So we used that latency in our favor by actually showing people the address they were ordering. B, if you are able to sort of really solve the problem, um, you can actually solve the problem 90-95% of times. Very often, you may not be able to solve this problems fully. And then it's very useful to just ask the customer, hey, I tried my defaulting logic and I'm not really sure, are this the address you want or the one below it, right? So sometimes it's very important for just ask the customer whenever you're not sure, instead of defaulting them to the address. And third, if you can really solve the problem, which can have a really bad experience for customers, that sort of makes it very a lot of delight for customers, right? So we solve that problem in a very visually appealing way, and then customers are sort of really happy. And over a period of time, we got a lot of kudos from customers on solving a problem which kept happening to them for a while, but then stopped happening.
Saurabh, can you actually share with us one, where what was the feedback, or was it an NPS survey? Like, how is it that you all realized this was a problem? Yes, one, we know the problem existed, but there must be so many problems that you reach out to. Second, what is the way in which you actually go through the NPS data?
We had 2% customers, like any other app, taking our NPS survey and actually answering NPS questions. And we realized certain events in the ordering journey led to massive detraction. When I say detraction, anybody who had that event in the last order would give us like a detractor rating. They would rate us 1 or 2 on 10, because usually people would rate us 8 or 9 or even 10, that they would recommend Swiggy to others. But suddenly, certain incidents like missing items, or the driver running away with your food, or you ordering at the wrong address and leading to an order cancellation. So cancellations in general, followed by cancellations where you actually ordered the wrong address and you ended up sort of spending a lot of time with the delivery partner to convince him to come to your new address, that had massive detraction. And we sort of then ranked these incidents in the order of frequency and detraction. And we realized that, hey, we can solve for the ones with higher frequency, but that may not have the maximum detraction, but rather sort of go for these less frequency, high detraction sort of incidents in the ordering journey, and cumulatively they will be about 1.5 to 2%, all combined together, right? Because we were generally very good with deliveries, but sometimes it would not happen as well as we had thought. So we thought, okay, let's just go and solve for the most egregious incidents, which lead to bad customer experience. And this was very often a contrarian approach, because usually people will say, hey, go solve for the most frequent occurrence, and let your long tail slip away. But in food delivery, where every order is an experience and people remember, especially when they're hungry and they get angry, and you used to call them hangry customers, right? And that is the moment of truth where the customer really remembers what really happened and why it happened, and they know whom to blame. And you go and fix those egregious problems. We used to call them embarrassments or broken windows, as many other people call them. Go and fix some of those which have very high detraction index, and the NPS data actually just corroborates what you feel as a customer yourself, right? That this, I need to go solve this problem. Yeah.
Saurabh, in this case, could you actually share with us one, the process in which you would collect user feedback, NPS? Just share some quick hacks for the product leaders and product managers.
Yeah. So incidentally, we took help from Bain. Bain is a consulting company which actually invented the NPS. So Bain had a team in Bangalore, and we actually called them to our premises and say, look, we want to revamp our NPS survey, right? And what is an NPS survey? Let's just take a step back. So in an NPS survey, you actually poll 2 to 5% of your customers, after the order has been delivered or after they've placed an order, and you actually ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this brand to friends and family, right? So when they say 9 or 10, that's a promoter, right? When they say 7 or 8, I'm only 7 on 10, then you're a neutral. We don't consider that as a promoter, right? And if you are between 1 to 6, you are a detractor, right? An NPS essentially is promoters minus detractors, right? So a typical food delivery company, Swiggy, Zomato, would be operating around an NPS of plus 20, where maybe let's just say 40% people would be promoters, let's say 20% or 30% would be detractors and 30% would be neutral.
Neutral.
Again, the average sort of usually promoters minus detractors comes out to be 20 right now. It used to be a lower number when our experience wasn't that great. But that is where, that is how you calculate NPS. Now, that is just the first question, right? So you gauge gauge that metric, which is the overall metric in the first question. Now, when people are promoting you, which means they rated you 9 or 10, you actually ask a bunch of L1s, hey, why would you promote us, right? Why would you? Is it because of our delivery experience? Is it because of our selection? Is it because of our pricing and promotions? Is it because of our, we have very good service and, our menu items are well curated? Bunch of reasons you ask them, right? Maybe 5 or 6 reasons. And then they say, okay, let me pick restaurant selection, right? And then you can even go into L2s. Okay, what makes you think we've got great selection, right? And sometimes people will stop answering at L1, but you still make the question so appealing that they actually should go and answer L2s. And when they go to L2s, you can actually ask them, hey, your favorite restaurants are available, or the iconic restaurants in the city are available or not. And they give you reasons for promotion, right? Similarly, for detractors, right? Hey, you were not happy with our delivery experience, for example. Now, they rated you as a detractor, and then you asked them why, and you said delivery experience was bad, right? And then within delivery experience, hey, the order went to the wrong address, or the order was inadvertently delayed beyond 10 minutes, or the driver did not follow, or delivery partner did not follow the delivery instructions, right? Or it could be something else, right? So L2s will give you reasons why they were a detractor, right? So that is the form of NPS which we sort of ran it past Bain. We sort of made sure our NPS was very scientific. We used to only poll customers who had made payment for an order, right? But that may not be the only way to measure NPS. You can also measure different types of NPS. So later on, we started doing browse NPS. So people who browsed but did not place an order, right? Can I poll them,
Oh.
right? Then how was your browse experience? Could you really find what you were looking for? Like e-commerce marketplaces like Mintra, they actually focus a lot on the browsing experience because only 5% customers would come and place an order, and then the remaining, a lot of them will actually go from the website itself or the app itself. So can you really poll them and ask, hey, how was your navigation experience? Could you find the brands you were looking for? Did you have the right filters in the app for you to zero down on the right brands? Did we not show you the right selection? Right? Because Mintra also has a lot of private label brands. So you when you open the app, like I didn't want this, but because it's private label, that's actually pushed onto your homepage. So they actually have a very very intuitive browse NPS, which is very useful for them, I'm sure. So that's the whole theory of NPS and how you measure it.
And there are two questions that actually come to my mind when you've been sharing this, Saurabh. One, you mentioned this browse NPS. So, can you share with us the different types of NPS? Secondly, what was one of the most surprising NPS for you when you did, when you were doing this particular project with Bain?
Yeah. So let me tell you about the different types of NPSs. So whatever we just discussed, right, where somebody places an order and then you poll them after the order is either cancelled or delivered, or they made the payment and the payment also failed. You can actually also poll them that time. So that's an episodic NPS, right? And Bain crafted this episodic NPS really well. Along with that, there is also something called relationship NPS or RNPS, right? Now, RNPS, you're not really keen to poll customers who just place an order, right? In RNPS, you're also trying to target some of your competition's customers. So when I used to run RNPS, at different companies, including Ola and later on in Swiggy, I would go to an agency, a research agency, and I would tell them, get me 10,000 customers who order food online, right? And incidentally, maybe 70% of them would be Swiggy customers, 30% would be Zomato, and maybe 50% would actually use both the apps, right? And some of them would be lapsed Swiggy customers, some of them would be active Zomato and active Uber Eats, whatnot, right? So this agency would then get me 10,000 people and then ask questions on, hey, how would you rate Swiggy or competitor X, competitor Y on these parameters, right? And again, they'll be the same parameters, delivery experience, selection, pricing and promotions, and you know, the menu quality and catalog quality and blah blah blah, right? So you actually get now a relationship NPS now is telling you, hey, what is me versus competition? So for a very long time, based on whatever numbers I saw, Swiggy used to be always ahead of Zomato on delivery experience because we sort of nailed it right back then. And I think Zomato sort of caught up after that. And Zomato was always sort of higher, a little bit higher than us on selection. And the reason for that was, hey, they didn't have more restaurants that time, of course, but the fact that they were also an offline, dining sort of company, they had that selection on the app. So the customers would say, "Oh, Zomato has more restaurants. Maybe only 70% of them deliver, right?" So, but then they have more restaurants, right? So selection-wise, they always sort of led us on our NPS. So relationship NPS is another form of NPS which you cannot do yourself, but of course, if you have a strong research team, you can do that. Usually, you sort of on an ongoing basis every month you do it once. You get an agency to do it, and that agency is usually very very impartial. And people they're using for these surveys, they don't know who is conducting the survey, so it's like
Okay.
blindsided. The other form of NPS, as we discussed, was browse NPS, which is you don't want the customer to transact on your app first. You just want people who are coming in. Again, these is being used by companies where the conversion numbers are low, right? So if you want to go buy electronics on Amazon, Amazon would actually figure out a way to do browse NPS. It, hey, you came in, you browsed a bunch of electronics items, or you browsed smartphones. What was your experience? What could have been better, right? So that is because not everybody is going to transact, and you want those customers to give you inputs. Hey, people who do not transact, what is their feedback about how my experience is, right? And then you can also have very niche sort of NPSs called, for example, one of the PMs at Swiggy came to me and said, "Hey, I want to devise a payments NPS, which means people who have, when they're going through this payments experience, can I really poll them and ask them, hey, how would you sort of recommend this experience of payments to other people?" And again, the question may not be like, would you recommend this payments experience to friends and family? You can actually change the question. But what you're trying to do is like get real time feedback as people are making that payment. Did it go through well? Did it not go through well? And I wouldn't then call it an NPS. I would then call it real time feedback that you're trying to get that while customers are actually going through the experience. And then you can sort of segregate them: payment successful, payment failed. How are people sort of rating you on a bunch of things? But you could also do that in an NPS way. Would you recommend this experience to others or not? And then have a bunch of L1s and L2s, right? So those are some examples of very niche NPSs where you can target certain sets of customers performing certain action on the app, and then understand, do they recommend the app to others for this activity?
In terms of, given that you mentioned four different kinds, they also come at different points of the user journey. How is it that you create a balance and you just do not like, it gets very annoying when I'm in a journey and someone's like, would you recommend this? And I'm like, let me please finish this journey before you ask that. So,
Yeah.
one is, how do you create this balance?
Yeah. So we don't really poll a lot of customers. We have, let's say, only 2% customers get asked this question on how was your last order, right? And the channels we use are never in app. So at least that was the learning we had. Don't use in app channels. Use
Wow.
email, use push notification after somebody is, so 1 hour after. So we want to understand how was your food experience, which means have you finished your food? And the hypothesis is usually within the next hour of delivery, you actually have finished your food, right? So you also wanted to understand, hey, was the food delivered to you hot? Was it tasty? Was it yummy? And was it was it like healthy and so on? Was it oily, right? So we would, we actually still send these NPS surveys via push notification 1 hour after the food is delivered. And sometimes it's also using an email, but email, what happens is you may not get the answer immediately. Somebody might just say, "I'm going to answer this email 4 days later," and then they're not really referring to the last order. I mean, they might have placed another order, right? So they might be referring to the second last order, or the last order, and you may be referencing it on some other order, right? So then the attribution becomes problem. So I think for a high repeat use case with millions and millions of customers, push notifications work really well for us. and that was the only channel they used. You can also try SMSs. There are certain grocery delivery apps which try in apps. So if you go to a big basket or apps like OTP, they actually ask you how was your last order when you open the app the next time after it's delivered. That's pretty fair because you actually remember you've sort of had a day or two since the last order happened, and you actually open the packets and see how the vegetables were and how the grocery was, and then that sort of works really well in that setting. So people pick whatever works very well for them. For us, as you rightly mentioned, while you're doing the activity, we are a high frequency app, so we don't want to ping you in the app because you may want to place another order, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for grocery delivery, where you're placing one order every 4 or 5 days, that sort of works pretty well.
So you've shared with us some cool hacks on customer experience, NPS. Definitely, given your entire career, I always ask this question to all the product leaders that do come on. So, what are the three things, in your opinion, that one needs to do to become a PM?
So, in my opinion, the first thing a PM should be capable of is structured thinking, right? And I would add clear communication along with it. Why? Because as a product manager, you need to assess situations, use your judgment, and also explain your judgment to multiple people all the time. This happens all the time, right? In a typical day, you could be in like 6 meetings and one-on-ones with your leadership and skip level leaders. If you cannot explain your judgment really well and really tell people in a structured way what you're thinking, it's super hard to be a PM, and everybody around you will struggle to work with you if that PM cannot think in a structured way and cannot communicate in a clear, structured way. So, what I look for is structured thinking and clear communication. I would love to tag both of them together because they're just so important as a whole, right? The other thing we look at is, especially in 0 to 1, or rather 1 to 100, or growth stage companies, is how well are you at creative problem solving, right? So we want people to come and solve problems for customers and for businesses in meaningfully creative and differentiated ways, right? Because if it's not creative, if it's not differentiated, everybody else can copy it, or you're just sort of creating something which is table stakes, and that doesn't allow growth companies to keep growing, right? So we want creative problem solvers, and we look for that very thoroughly in our interviews. Wherever I have interviewed PMs, I've always looked for creativity, and I've also always looked for creative problem solving. So that's the other bit, in my opinion, right? The third thing which I usually look for is how well is this person able to prioritize. And prioritization is so important for a product manager. It's like a very, very basic skill. You will always have so much to do, not just so much to do as a roadmap, but different themes to chase. And as a PM, which theme you're picking, and in what order are you solving? Are you approaching the different items in the roadmap? What items are you picking eventually? How are you changing your roadmap when a strategic intervention occurs? And that happens all the time. So you have to sort of be very, very nimble with your roadmap and be able to sort of have that view that in this scenario, with this strategic input that I have, how does my roadmap change with the company strategy, right? So prioritization, and very often people try to prioritize everything, and I tell them it is not prioritization until it hurts, and that is a very, very important skill for a PM.
So, if I have to summarize the three things that you think are structured thinking and communication, and you've clubbed that as one, the
Yeah,
second one is creative problem solving, and third is being good at prioritization. So,
yeah.
I'm going to pick on your second one where you've spoken about creative problem solving. You worked at Ola. You've actually worked in, especially in a country like India, where low trust economy is such a big factor. How is it that you have in your own career actually used creative problem solving to solve some of the biggest challenges that you might have faced?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I joined Ola in Q1 2016, when Ola was still a very nascent business. That was a time when all across social media there was a lot of chatter around ghost rides. Now, what are ghost rides? Now, ghost rides are rides where the driver actually started the trip without the customer inside, and the customer is watching on their app as the driver tours around the city, and they get a bill at the end of it, and their wallet gets deducted for whatever reason. And they would throng our customer support teams and call them, email them, and 3% of our customers back then, if I'm not mistaken, ballpark, right? 3% were ghost rides, where I mean, 3% were reported ghost rides, and I'm sure many of those customers reported correctly, and that was a big embarrassment for us. And I remember talking to multiple PMs were trying to solve this problem at Ola, and I was talking to our booking experience product lead, and he was like, "This is the number one concern I have." And I was in customer engagement, so sort of we partnered together to sort of solve this problem. Where how can you solve this problem of fraud and ghost rides, which is really impacting customer experience? And I remember one of our investors back then was the head of SoftBank, Nikesh Arora, and in one of his emails to our CEO, which eventually sort of came to me from him, he had written a very strong line, which I still remember, and he sort of mentioned India is a low trust economy. And he didn't give us a lot of reasons in that email, but he actually told us, hey, try to understand your customer at a locality level. Like people in Chandni Chowk are so different from people who stay in Bangalore Whitefield and or in Kolaba, Bombay, right? Everybody is so different, right? So go and understand your customers at a regional level. And India happens to be a low trust economy, so you need to build products which sort of allow you to
Res-
navigate that low trust scenario. Now, what do I mean by low trust, right? Let's just get into that. So in China, if a driver says, I waited for a customer for 5 minutes at a pickup point and I left, the, the fact that the country, the upbringing of people is such that everybody sort of tends to speak almost the truth, right? So you can actually believe that the car driver actually waited for 5 minutes and then left. Whereas in India, the driver may not have even reached the location or reached the location immediately left. And so you can put all the geofencing checks. The driver actually reaches there and zooms. The customer is not even inside the car. So we sort of took those inputs from multiple people, heard from our customers, and had a proposal for our leadership that we're going to put two-factor authentication on our rights, which
oh, you're
meant,
the reason I have to remember my OTP or I have to give an OTP now.
yeah, I mean, there was literally no other way. So we sort of proposed to our leadership, we're going to try this OTP-based authentication. Obviously, you can imagine we were a company which really prioritized customer experience, and our founder actually stood by it. And his first reaction was, "Are you nuts? I mean, you want to add a friction to rights, but we just made a case for it." And he said 3% rights, we're actually refunding back the money to customers, and that's also bad customer experience. And people who go through that experience, their frequency drops from 5 rides a month to 2 rides a month. They still take it because there are only two apps. So you still not like stop using it. Sometimes you might just stop using it also. But that's a massive delta, and that's a massive customer lifetime value hit, because most of your customers are going to sort of not use you, and then it becomes unpredictable, right? So it's a crazy experience which I want to mitigate. And we tried a bunch of solutions. Geofencing, as I mentioned, that didn't work. We tried other authentication solutions, but actually, what really worked was an OTP based handshake, where we would send the customer an OTP, and we actually built a tier one service which is 99.99% sort of capable of sending you an SMS accurately within a few seconds. If the SMS still fails, you'll also have a push notification on your Android phone. You would also have the OTP on the app itself, where you can open the app and the OTP is right there. So there were multiple sort of touch points where the OTP could be generated.
In this case, what were some of the key considerations sort of that you had when you were designing this system? Because you had to ensure it was both secure but user friendly, right? And getting people to adopt something for the first time, there's always a pushback. And I do know for a fact that it was Ola which did it first and then Uber kind of followed suit. So unlike where there was already Uber, so we knew how to book it, but this was the first that y'all actually pioneered. So, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when we sort of designed the solution, we knew in a happy scenario this would work really well, because the happy scenario means your phone is healthy, you're in a good network area, and you're not booking for somebody else, you're booking for yourself. So as long as these conditions are true, the SMS-based handshake usually works very well, right? So there was definitely some friction for customers in this case, but we figured out that in a country like India, where there's so many complaints of the wrong driver coming for pickup, people boarding the wrong cab at times, right? And then later realizing, oh yeah, I boarded the wrong cab. And of course, the whole ghost ride problem, that it's super important for us to have that trust in the system where you authenticate the ride with something. And of course, we hadn't built for certain scenarios. Certain scenarios being when your phone is dying, you cannot really access the phone after it's dead. So you memorize the OTP, or you're sitting in a bar, underground, basement, and your network is pretty bad. In that
Yeah.
case, you book the ride and then you cannot get the OTP, or you're booking for somebody else, right? So those were some problems which we hadn't solved for, but we went ahead and launched the solution in a few cities to start with, and smaller cities, and then it went to larger cities, and then it became pan India, and eventually we did solve for. And what really worked was for female customers, especially after the Uber incident in 2014, I guess, they were looking for such mechanisms where they're very sure of entering the right cab, and the site driver, they can mask the photo and all that, right? So this OTP based thing made sure that the car you're entering is the right car, because then or at least the driver is carrying the right phone with him, and it's not somebody else like his brother or his nephew who's coming and picking you up. So that sort of made sure our market share for female customers went up. Our market share in general went up because those 3% rights came back to us, and people started feeling, hey, Ola is sort of more secure. So we actually led market share versus a competitor in 2016. For a very long time, Ola was the number one market share app in India.
So, sir, can you also share some of the other examples of how companies can definitely build trust, whether it's, food delivery, or even if I'm not in any of these, e-commerce apps, but can you give us some hacks that could help us and maybe some examples?
Yeah. So in a country like India, it's very important for you to have disincentives and incentives for great behavior, right? So at Swiggy, if we hear complaints about a driver or a delivery partner not being very polite to customers, or marking deliver incorrectly, or having issues with delayed pickups or moving in the wrong direction and so forth, and we hear customer complaints in some instances, we actually give them like a two strike policy, where in a month, if you've got two such incidents, you would either stop getting orders altogether or
Oh,
get lower than expected orders, right? So we can actually demand shape to good drivers. So our matching algorithms for where we match drivers, delivery partners to orders, is such that it rewards good behavior for drivers or delivery partners, right? And delivery partners who have a flawless record, who are polite to the customers, who get very less delivery related complaints, they get more number of orders, right? And the algorithm sort of make sure that they are rewarded. We also have certain intelligence, like and we used to have this problem of mark delivered incorrectly at Swiggy, where drivers would mark the order delivered, and the customer hasn't really got the order, right? Few instances, of course, not more, maybe 0.3, 0.4% orders used to be like that. But 0.3, 0.4% at our scale could be 5 to 7,000 orders a day, right? And that's massive. Right?
yeah.
5,000 customers where they had to go through this, anxiety of driver marking the order delivered, it's not delivered yet. The driver might still give you the order, but why did he mark delivered before the order was actually handed over to you? So we actually added a bunch of geofencing checks. In fact, certain times when the geofencing checks are not possible, or the driver actually marks arrived way ahead of the location, we actually have
Ah,
an OTP based handshake for Swiggy also, So in 1.5 to 2% orders where the driver actually is maybe new or untrained, and I remember it happening when delivery partners would mark arrived at the society gate. My house is way inside, right? And so they would actually need an OTP now for Swiggy also, not in all
You
the
won't
orders, but
believe, yeah, this just happened to me 2 days back when suddenly the Swiggy guys, like, the Instamart person, like, OTP. And I'm just staring at him, I'm like, what?
yeah,
OTP in Swiggy? And
right.
now that you're mentioning this, it's so, like, so did you actually just copy what you did in, like, in Ola to
No,
Swiggy to do?
so Ola was very different. Ola, it happens for all the rides, right?
Okay.
Because you're actually outside your home. Whereas in Swiggy, it only happens for cases when the driver marks, "Hey, I have reached a destination," but our
Ah,
records tell the destination is far away, and we then say, "Okay, you've reached there. This is the OTP, right? Go figure." And so they cannot mark it delivered. They just can mark it arrived. I've arrived at the customer location. The delivery
ah.
requires an OTP. So that sort of solved the mark delivered incorrectly problem once for all. Yeah.
So, in your experience, what I'm understanding is using different levers and to incentivize and disincentivize, whether it's the supplier or the person who's accepting, kind of has made a huge difference. You shared with us the Ola example where we now have to share an OTP to ensure that the driver's actually there and he's actually picking you up, or he says the person's not arrived, or in case of Swiggy, where the order has actually been rightly delivered. Uh, these are some very interesting hacks. Sort of, I want to go into some other career hacks that you would love to share with some
Hmm.
early PMs that you think would be super helpful for their career.
Yeah. So I can share a hack which sort of has worked for me all the time. And whenever it has not worked for me, I haven't been a stellar PM in that company, right? So it's been like very, very important for me, and it sort of corroborates itself. So, in my opinion, if you know the customer and really empathize with the customer and really know the customer situation and the customer pain points inside out, you can do really well and make solid decisions as a PM, right? So in most of the companies I worked for, I knew the customer really well. I invested my own time, sometimes my own, placing my own orders to be a customer. Luckily, you could do that if it's a consumer company. So putting myself in the customer's shoes, going through that journey myself multiple times, and also whenever I was and really read a lot of customer feedback, app store ratings, NPS surveys, and that is the hack. Within, I can guarantee you, if you
When you were sharing the three things that a PM needs, you mentioned the third one being the ability to prioritize, right? That's a struggle. I don't think it's limited to PMs. It's whether you're a UI UX designer, you're a PM, you're a PMM, we all struggle with it. Do you have any certain framework or methodology in which you do prioritization and which you'd be happy to share with us?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a question which I have an evolving answer all the time because I'm also learning since many years how to prioritize. And I wouldn't say there is one single framework which you can use, though there are a few which are commonly used, like RICE. I have used RICE, but the problem with RICE is you cannot use it across themes. If you've got a theme, let's just take Swiggy as an example, right? One theme is improve conversion. The other theme is improve reliability of order delivery. The third theme could be improve repeats of customers, right? And and so how do I sort of then have items in my roadmap which talk to each of the features I have, which need to be on the roadmap for this theme to be successful, for me to hit certain targets, right? Now, within each theme, you can use a framework like RICE. Now, RICE is nothing but reach. You've got like you grade each feature on the reach, how many customers it's going to reach, the potential
Impact.
impact. So, I is for impact. C is the confidence in that impact. So, I may be sort of hoping for a 0.1% conversion improvement, but I'm only 50% sure. So actually, you'll take that as 0.05. And the last one is effort. So that's inversely proportional. So the higher the effort within each theme, you try to say, these are my six things in that theme. I'm going to put them in a RICE framework, and I'm going to get like an answer. But again, that's just a framework, right? And the very best PMs know how to use a framework and sometimes even override that framework. So maybe the number four feature in your list on RISE, which is after prioritization out of that six, is really important for the company strategy, or really important for the company to solve that problem. So you would say, okay, this is number four in my list, not the top three, but maybe I'm going to start with this right now because this is the most important thing. The most important thing.
Saurabh, this has been great fun having you on Behind the Feature.